Hello and welcome to a new overdress episode review. It feels like it's been a while, huh? I actually kind of like that. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but the fact that there was a hiatus meant that I had some time to like mellow out. Especially after making that video essay, which you should totally go watch, it'll be in the end card. But like after making that video essay and spending like continuous days non-stop editing and looking at overdress footage whilst I was editing, I kind of got sick and tired of seeing the footage. And so I kind of needed a bit of a break from overdress, but now that it's been a few months, I'm kind of ready to kind of get back into it, and I'm excited again. So, to preface, this is the episode review. That may sound obvious, but we also got an opening theme, not in this episode, but it'll premiere properly in the next episode, and we got like a YouTube/Twitter upload of it today. We won't be talking about that yet. There's already enough in there on its own to justify its own separate video. So we'll go ahead and do that later. I might talk about that in the same video that I talk about the trailer for Season 2. I don't know if there's going to be enough or too much. I don't know. We'll see. Basically, be subscribed if you want to see more overdress anime videos, because they're coming now that the hiatus is done, you know? Without further ado, though, let's get into the episode. So, this is episode 13 of Cardfight Vanguard overdress. It is the first episode of Season 2, but I say that in air quotes because it's more pitched as sort of a prologue episode rather than its own actual proper episode. Obviously, it's counted as one with the way they've numbered it and everything, and it absolutely is a must-watch. But it definitely does feel more like a tone setter than it does anything else. So let's kind of get into it, right? So the main plot of this episode was basically after Season 1, like at the end of Season 1, danji announces that he's leaving Blackout, and that's kind of all he really says. He's just like, I'm gone, bye, and doesn't really elaborate any further. Now, of course, in the opening theme, we get a bit more context to that, but here in this episode itself, we don't really get much context, so we won't be talking about that context since it's not mentioned in this episode. But basically, Megumi's like, alright, gotta do something about it, can't just let this happen, can't just let, the leader of our group just disappear without saying anything. So she basically tries to follow him, finds him at the train station, challenges him to a card fight, and that's basically all we get. But I think it was a pretty good episode, so let's kind of get into it some more. So basically, let's pick a good image, actually. This is a good image. I like how this one looks. Yeah, so basically, what's good about this episode is, it's a good tone setter. This episode feels very, quiet and somber, which I really like. We got, no opening, and the ending seems to be, a special one, rather than the usual ending theme that we will be getting in the next episode for Season 2. We got a different song, so it does feel a bit more mellow and slower paced, but I really like that, of course. I really like when it focuses on its characters, and it's basically just showing the aftermath of this thing that happened in the last episode that didn't really seem to happen all too loudly. The big memorable part of the episode was danji beating Toyo in the card fight and Toyo joining Blackout. But the really, quiet, small thing that we ended on was danji just being like, alright, I'm out. And then now we actually get a full episode just dealing with the aftermath of that. And of course, we're going to touch on it more as the series progresses as well, of course. But I like just having that first episode to sort of do that. And also, this is something that I'm not sure how many people would have fully processed, but the idea that this episode had no Yu in it at all is really cool. Now, that's not saying I don't like Yu. I think Yu is a really fascinating protagonist. I like him a lot. But the thing that fascinates me is that this is the first episode of Season 2 and no protagonist. That's really refreshing, I like that we got time to just focus on Megumi and danji. I feel like it would have been so easy to have Yu be the one to go after danji and basically have the same episode play out but with Yu instead. But I actually think it fits better with Megumi. Megumi seems a lot more stubborn and a lot more likely to follow up on this kind of thing on her own. If this was Yu in this situation, he would have explained all this stuff to the members of Blackout, and they probably would have went as a group with him. Whereas Megumi seems a lot more likely to just kind of silently follow him off on her own, and I like that a lot. So yeah, I like that Megumi had so much trouble like kind of explaining what was happening. You know, she was like, I don't know what's happening. I need more context. Danji refuses to give that more context. He's like, sorry, I've just got to go. And I can definitely see why it would be hard for Danji to explain that stuff. Obviously, we don't know fully what's going on, but I can definitely see it's a situation even he doesn't really want to be in. And then the card fight was really cool. Basically, they explained that the reason the card fight's happening is because Megumi is having such a difficult time even talking to Danji in the first place, that she thinks that expressing her words through a card fight would be better. And I love playing Vanguard on a seat like that. That's such a real scenario, you know, like the idea of like, I want to card fight someone, but like there's no table here, so I guess we just place them down next to ourselves on a seat like that, you know. I like that. That feels very real, you know. It's like the exact opposite end of the spectrum that like Yu-Gi-Oh characters getting out of duel disc with holograms and stuff is, you know. Like those are the two very extreme ends of the spectrum. One is super high fantasy, and the other one is like so down to earth it hurts. But I really liked it. It felt very creative. It felt like this episode must have been written by someone who was in that situation. And it's a very believable situation to be in. When we saw like a trailer a little while ago that kind of showed bits of this card fight, but it only really showed like Megumi and Danji's face, so I assumed there would be a table between them. So the fact that there wasn't is kind of hilarious. It's funny, but it also adds a lot to this sort of world building. It's a world that isn't built around Cardfight Vanguard. It's a more realistic world, and I like that a lot. It feels a bit cheesy and forced in a lot of card game anime when they have like the world built around the card game. Obviously in stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh it's intentional. It's a fantasy series where the fantasy is that Duel Monsters is such a massive card game. But like I remember even in the original 2011 Cardfight Vanguard series, they had like bits of that where like it still felt like a real world, you know. It still felt pretty grounded and down to earth. But then every once in a while you'd have like a scene where Kai is hanging out in a cafe called like the Vanguard Cafe or something, and it just like hits you really hard in the face because it's like you don't expect it. So to have something like this where they're like really sticking to the making things more realistic and down to earth, I'm a big fan of it. And the card fight itself was really good. Obviously the main focus of the card fight was what the characters were saying to each other during it. You know, like it was more of a character development focused episode. Seeing how these two characters interact with each other in this situation was really fascinating to me. Like I say this a lot, this series, your investment depends on how interested in the characters you are. And to me, I'm interested in these characters, so seeing them interact like this is really fun. Well, not necessarily fun because it's a bit more of a somber episode, but it was still really interesting to see. Whereas if you don't care about these characters at all, it's not really going to do anything for you, you know? So, yeah. I really liked the card fight. I even liked Megumi's, like, getting a 6 damage heal, because obviously that's such a cliche in a card game anime to do something like that, where the character just suddenly wins because they got a 6 damage heal. But I like that it played with our expectations. I really expected this episode to be a much darker one than it was. Because whilst this episode took itself seriously, it wasn't really that dark. Because I was expecting like Danji to just destroy her in a card fight, especially with how Danji's been set up as like the best card fighter out of any of them. And for that loss to be like devastating. But instead, it felt very like optimistic and hopeful, as I saw here. And every single moment of the card fight, I was expecting something to go wrong. A moment where like the optimistic music would like suddenly cut out, something like that, where like Megumi would make a mistake and Danji would win out of nowhere, that kind of thing. But no, she actually did win, and I like that. Like the lack of a subversion is in and of itself the subversion. I think that was really good. Yeah, no, and I just really like the card fight in general. I know there was no imagination scene with them fighting on Cray and everything. And yeah, I just thought this was a really fun card fight. There was no imagination scene in this one. But it looks like episode 2 is going to have the really big sort of hype animation sequence in the Yu Yu versus Toya card fight that's coming up soon. And like I said, this was more of a prologue episode, more of a tone setter. And like I've even said before, like, not only would it be ridiculous to expect a big, like, imagination Sakuga sequence every single episode or every single card fight, they clearly don't have, no one has enough budget for that. No anime would be able to afford that many Sakuga action scenes. But also, like, the fact that they don't always have it is more interesting to me because it means that you don't know when it's going to happen, right? Like, I mean, obviously I know it's going to happen next episode because I've seen the trailer and everything, but, you know, like, when you don't know if it's going to happen or not, that's really exciting to me. And the fights are already, like, really fun and interesting even without it. I like following along these card fights. I've said this stuff a billion times before, but it bears repeating, right? Like, to me, seeing the characters just slapping down the cards on a table or even a chair in this situation is entertaining to me because I like the card game and I like the kind of stories and struggles these characters are going through anyway. So I really like this stuff. We got a lot of flashbacks, like, showing, like, scenes of when danji and Megumi met and showing the impacts that they've had on each other. That stuff I really liked, where Megumi was telling him that, like, she hadn't even had ramen before she met him and that kind of stuff. Some of the flashbacks, if not all of them, were reused animation from previous episodes, but that's okay. It's not too bad. It's not One Piece levels. You know, so I thought that stuff was really good. It was just a really fun, solid episode overall. I honestly don't really have that much to say about this one, just because it set out to do something fairly simple, and it achieved that very well. I do really like that we went for such an understated season premiere. You know, like, we could have went all guns a-blazing with tons of soccer action scenes and all that other stuff. But I like that we went for a bit of a slower, more character-focused one, you know? And that's kind of what has drawn me to overdress in the first place from the very beginning, you know? And that's the stuff I really like about it. So I'm actually kind of happy they're doubling down on it. And I'm interested to see where things go next. I've obviously got my theories. For example, I'm really, really, really excited to see what they do with Toya in this season specifically, because of the fact that Toya worked with Masanori in season 1. So he's probably got a lot of info about how he could help against Daybreak. Because obviously, let's face it, we all know by now this season is going to be Team Blackout versus Team Daybreak. And everyone, like, doesn't really trust... Like, no one really trusts Toya yet because he was such a villain in the first season. And he's just suddenly thrust in this role where he's supposed to be a leader for this team. But I think the way he's going to be able to win them over is, I think that outside of danji, he's the strongest card fighter out of anyone at Blackout. Probably. For now, I'd say he is. So he's going to be winning a lot of fights, I'm assuming. But also, he might have some intel and some know-how as to, like, what's going on. At the end of this episode, we did get a trailer, and I'm not going to talk about it too much, but in that trailer, like, it has a scene where Toya's, like, looking at a smartphone that has Mirai on, and he says something along the lines of, "We gotta stop them." So, we can imply from that clip anyway, we don't know if it's 100% true, of course, but we can imply from that clip that he at least knows enough to know who Mirai is and that she needs to be stopped. So I was under the impression he'd only really worked with Shinobu and Masanori, but I guess maybe he worked with the other members of Daybreak as well, right? So that's going to be really interesting to see. So yeah, that's basically all I really have to say about this one. It was a really solid episode. It feels interesting to have a first episode back that doesn't really have that much to delve into overall, but I appreciate that it had a more smaller scale focus. It just wanted to do one thing and do that one thing really well, and I think it achieved that. I'm really enjoyed this. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this series heads in future. I'm very excited to see the upcoming car fight. Obviously, Kinema Citrus and Bushiroad mentioned that this season is going to be a lot heavier on the card fights, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing how they balance that with the character writing. This season definitely feels like it's going to be a bit more shonen action than we're used to for Vanguard, and hopefully it manages to balance that well, you know? So yeah, that's basically all I've got for now. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that other great stuff to see more Vanguard overdress videos in the future. And I will see you later. Remember, for every statement, there's an asterisk.